Welcome to This Explainer. You know that feeling when you look at your paycheck and see that massive chunk taken out? Yeah, we've all been there, and it stings a bit, right? But today, we're going to look past that initial sting. We're diving into how those exact deductions actually fuel a massive, dynamic engine that literally drives the world around us. Taxes are way more than just a bill.
So, you might be wondering, why do politicians and economists spend absolutely endless hours arguing about tax policy? Well, it's because taxes are way more complex than just a simple line item on your pay stub. Actually, a single shift in tax policy can create or completely destroy millions of jobs. It can redirect billions of dollars and fundamentally change the financial decisions you and I make every single day.
Think about it. We usually just see taxes as a subtraction from our wealth, money out the door. But the economic reality? It's a whole different story. Taxation is literally the primary lever that governments pull to influence what you buy, where massive companies decide to set up shop, and how fast an entire nation's economy can grow. It's like a giant control panel for the economy.
Okay, here's how we're going to break this all down today. First, the true power of taxes. Then, how taxes actually affect your wallet. Next, we'll look at how they shape business and innovation, followed by the big economic growth puzzle. And finally, we're going to debunk some really common tax myths.
All right, let's jump right into part one, the true power of taxes and why it's about so much more than just collecting revenue.
At its absolute simplest, taxation is just a massive balancing act. Step 1. It transfers money from the private sector. That means you, me, and businesses. Step 2. That money moves over to the government to fund essential services, things we all rely on like roads, schools, and defense. In Step 3, this constant flow of capital ends up influencing the entire economic balance of a country. It changes the money people get to keep, and it dictates the money governments get to spend.
Now here's the real kicker. Finding the right balance is incredibly difficult. It's like walking a tightrope. See, too little taxation starves public services. Potholes don't get fixed, schools don't get funded. But on the flip side, too much taxation seriously crushes the incentive for people to work hard, invest, or take a huge risk to start a new business. Finding that exact sweet spot, it's honestly one of the biggest challenges in all of economics.
Let's bring this down to earth with part 2, how taxes affect you, your wallet, and your choices.
So imagine you earn a $50,000 salary for the year. Pretty straightforward, right? This is your starting point right before the government steps in.
Now look at this. This brilliantly shows the immediate real-world impact. A simple 10% shift in tax policy dictates whether you have $40,000 or $35,000 left over to live your life. That is a $5,000 swing in your purchasing power, and it's determined entirely by the stroke of a politician's pen.
Economists actually have a name for this money you get to keep. They call it disposable income. And listen, this is the absolute lifeblood of consumer spending. Think about it. When millions of people suddenly have more disposable income, what do? They go to stores, they buy cars, they eat out at restaurants. Businesses see those higher sales, and boom, they start hiring more workers. This is exactly why governments sometimes slash taxes during a recession. They want to inject that disposable income right back into your pocket to jumpstart the whole system.
But here's where it gets really fascinating. Taxes don't just change how much you spend, they actively change how you spend it. This brings us to a really cool field called behavioral economics. It's basically the practice of using financial incentives to influence the everyday decisions you and I make.
Basically, governments use taxes to deliberately shape our behavior. Check out these examples. Higher taxes on cigarettes, well, that makes the habit super expensive, which naturally reduces smoking. Tax credits for electric vehicles make them way cheaper to buy. Tax deductions for education help build a more skilled workforce. And tax advantages for your retirement account, that highly encourages you to save for your future. The government is essentially nudging your behavior toward activities they think are beneficial for society.
Moving right along to part 3, shaping business and innovation, and how companies actually grow.
You know, just like you and me, businesses are constantly making choices. Every day they have to decide, should we hire new employees? Should we expand our operations? Maybe buy some expensive new equipment or open a brand new location. Well, the amount of corporate tax they pay directly impacts exactly how much profit they have left over to actually reinvest into making that growth happen. Now, you might be thinking, hey, businesses obviously want taxes to be zero so they can keep all their profits, right? Well, not exactly. What most people don't realize is that businesses rely heavily on tax-funded public infrastructure to even function. A delivery company needs paved roads. International shipping relies on safe ports. Literally every business relies on the legal system to enforce their contracts. So the whole business ecosystem actually requires a really delicate balance between keeping profits and funding the very environment they operate in.
And on top of that, starting a brand new business is a massive, daunting risk. To encourage people to actually take that leap, governments will often use specific tax incentives. They might offer tax credits for research and development to spark some new innovation. Or they might provide investment incentives to help risky startups attract the funding they desperately need. They essentially use the tax code as a financial cushion for the incredibly risky jump into entrepreneurship.
All right, let's zoom out for part 4, the economic growth puzzle, scaling this all up to the world stage.
So here's a super common assumption you'll hear all the time. Cutting taxes automatically creates an economic boom, right? Well, in theory, sure. Tax cuts should lead to increased spending. But human behavior is incredibly unpredictable. If consumers are suddenly worried about a coming recession, or they just lack confidence in the future, they aren't going to spend that extra money. Instead, they'll hoard the cash, stuff it in savings, or use it to pay off debt. And that is exactly why tax cuts don't always guarantee an instant economic explosion.
On the flip side, let's look at tax increases. Now, in the short term, raising taxes absolutely takes money out of people's pockets and drives up business costs. It can definitely slow things down. But, and this is a big but, if that collected revenue is invested wisely into highly productive infrastructure, better education programs, and overall economic stability, it can actually improve a country's economic growth significantly in the long run. When it comes to taxes, the timeline of the impact is absolutely crucial.
Which brings us perfectly to our final section, Part 5, Debunking Common Tax Myths and What Most People Get Wrong.
The first major myth we hear everywhere is that taxes inherently hurt economic growth. But the reality? Without taxes to fund basic legal systems, property rights, and public safety, a modern economy literally couldn't even exist. Private markets desperately need a secure foundation to operate on, and taxes are exactly what pay for that bedrock.
The second myth is on the exact opposite extreme, the assumption that lower taxes will always guarantee growth. But history and reality show us that slashing taxes without also cutting spending creates a massive deficit. This forces the government to borrow heavily, which can severely damage investor confidence and totally destabilize the broader economy. Ultimately, taxes are just one piece of a much, much larger economic puzzle.
To sum up this entire explainer, if you take away just one single thing today, make it this. Taxation is not simply about raising money. As we've seen, it's the primary engine governments use to shape human behavior, guide business investments, and quite literally build the society around us.
Now that you genuinely understand the powerful trade-offs at play here, you are way better equipped to decode the daily news. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. The next time you hear a headline about a new tax reform proposal, ask yourself not just how it impacts government revenue, but how is it going to fundamentally shift the incentives in your own life and the economy around you. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.